resiliency is very important, especially with the thoughts of climate change and things like diseases like COVID. Even if they hit our animals, how would they bounce back, and how would the plants do with extreme drought, and how would the soils react? It's very important, I think. The functioning of the soil is very important. It's alive, and we want resilience in it. We want the soil to have airspace and moisture holding capacity and some carbon flow, so that it keeps those carbon coatings on the aggregates and has some stability to it. And living roots is a big part of that, having cover on it. And with grazing management, we're talking about cover as far as like thatch, as well as having the green cover. And in general, if it's, just use the example of fescue, we'd like to keep 4 inches of grass height over it, and that keeps the temperature cooler, which makes the soil healthier, more organism activity, more moisture availability. Lots of benefits from managing the temperature, which, bare soil can be 15, 20 degrees hotter than covered soil, and that's a lot. But you can see it's got a granular structure, medium to strong granular structure, and this is a silt loam soil. Not all soils are going to look the same. Can't have the same expectations for all soils, but there's coatings on these aggregates that protect them. And the cool thing about the aggregates is there's pore space between them. See, there's some real strong aggregates up where the roots are stronger, and there's carbon coatings on that to protect them. Alright, so this is looking at the soil aggregates. There's a larger one there, but even these small ones have coatings on them, on the aggregates, to hold them together, to stabilize them, and there's pore space between them, and that's where the activity happens. That's where the soil life lives. That's where the water infiltrates. That's where the air exchange is. We want about 50% of the air, the pore space, to be water or moisture, and 50% be air. Organic matter wise, a target for this area is 5% organic matter. I'm at about 4%. Some soils are 3.5%. But every 1% organic matter will release 25 pounds of nitrogen. So 4%, 100 pounds of nitrogen. Most university recommendations are for about 100 pounds of N on grass per year. And it's slow release since it's an organic source. So I go to a lot of farms and work with a lot of people, and so often the fertility is out of balance. And I know it's been talked about a lot, but it's a real thing. Is they need to soil test and get it balanced to university recommendations. If it's out of balance, apply some that's needed, that's called for in that soil test, and you'll get a response. Low testing soils get a 75% response to application of nutrient. Medium testing soils, maybe 25%. High testing, 0 response, maybe even a negative response to applying fertilizer. Not talking about nitrogen, I'm talking about phosphorus and potash. But so that's a big one that needs to be addressed. But in general is manage what you have, whatever grass is out there. And a lot of times you may start with broom sedge, but there's fescue in there, and it just needs to be managed and released. About every 3 years I try to run fresh samples, and I try to run them on the whole farm at one time, and it gives a good relative comparison, as well as I can put on like lime more efficiently. And I try to divide the lime up though and do a third of the farm about, I don't know, every 6, 7 years, 8 years, something like that. My target pH is a 6.8, which is higher than the agronomic needs, but it's best for soil health. And it's maybe even easier to keep it at 6.8 than it is at 6.2. Seems more stable. Then seeing the organic matter climb slowly. Started at about 2%, and it's up to about 3.7 to about 4.5 is where I am now. And probably gone up roughly 1% every 10 years. So rather slow, but that's a big improvement, big help when it does increase, and it's you know, it's a journey. It's not like a destination. You need to just keep it going, keep that carbon cycling. And if we don't maintain that carbon flow, then the soil will collapse, because the soil life will eat up the coatings if they don't have another carbon source. And that's the simplest way, I think, to look at soil health is if we don't continually feed the soil life, they eat up the coatings, the soil collapses, and it'll become platy, flat layers across it, and water won't infiltrate. The roots won't go as deep. So it's important that we continuously have a carbon flow, and carbon is energy. It becomes carbohydrates, it becomes organic matter once we capture it, but if we don't capture it, it's just lost energy. Pretty much, if you do good grass management, you're benefiting soil health, because you're meeting all the principles of soil health, and you're going to have deeper roots, you're going to have more cover, you're going to have less disturbance because you're rotating off of it for a longer period. So, and you're going to have diversity a lot of times too, and having different forages out there. So, yeah, they just go hand in hand. And then on the plant side of resiliency, you know, just by good grazing management, prescribed grazing, and doing the take half, leave half, and the longer recovery times, we're going to have more roots. The plants are going to be more resilient because they have more leaf area to capture the light and just start the regrowth. Well, most of the carbon storage in this plant is in this stem base, right here at the base. And then, so if we take it too low, the plant has to pull that from the roots, and the roots die, and we don't get the regeneration or regrowth that we need. If we can maintain that, you'll get a lot quicker regrowth. But in general, manage what you have, but do get the fertility balanced, at least to some degree, as soon as possible, and that way you get rewarded for your management. And managing what you have is raise that grazing height to a minimum of 4 inches in the growing season. Could go down to 3 inches, but 4 inches is really more ideal. And then give it a break, rotate off of it for a minimum of 30 days. Then come back and graze it again, but don't take more than half of what's standing there, and you'll be rewarded for your management. It'll come around. But if it's been grazed to 1 inch for a long time, it's going to take at least one season for it to just get roots back under it and get ready to start producing. So don't count on big results within the first, say, 4 or 5 months. It's going to take a couple of growing seasons to get things rolling, and then it kind of turns into perpetual motion, and there you can cycle all these things, and the growth just gets better and better. take a pin and drop it. I want it to just go straight down. I want to intersect at least 7 leaves. So here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm getting into some brown, 6, and there's 7, maybe 8, 9. Usually it's not over 11 leaves. It's kind of topped out when you get to 11 leaves. That's relating it to leaf area index. The best we can do is capture 95% of the sunlight, which is the start of the whole carbon cycle, and photosynthesis will take us from there. On the animal side, in regenerative ag or resiliency ag, we could call it, is if we don't prop those animals up with dewormers and lots of antibiotics and all, then they're going to expose themselves as to which ones are not as productive and resilient and or resistant to disease and disorders. And we want them to expose themselves because they're the animals that are costing us money. If we treat the whole herd, we may not see those animals. They may not expose themselves. So that's part of regenerative management, is looking at the resilience and exposure, or being able to get rid of those animals, especially in a cow-calf operation where you're building genetics. Genetics and resiliency, yeah, that's important. And I'm more of a forage guy. I had to, in the last 10 years, I guess, I've been paying a lot more attention to the animal, and room and feel is really important in the rotation. And then I want an animal that's, well, I say I'm not discriminatory on color, because I've got a hodgepodge of colors, but I want the animal to be 2/3 of the height be body, and be wide, and so they have capacity for forage. And then I'd like to see a flat top on them so they have some room for muscling, and that's mainly it. And that goes for the sheep and the cattle and even the goats. Resiliency, we want resiliency throughout the soil, plant, animal side of things. So, and just doing some basic good management will allow that resiliency to happen.